Welcome to Infinite Heights, a place where knowledge is a superpower and millions are made and conserved. Today, we're diving into a critical issue shaking North America's trade landscape. Canada, a key U.S. ally, is preparing to retaliate against proposed tariffs, a move that could disrupt deeply integrated supply chains in the automotive industry and beyond. Join us as we unpack 7 pivotal outcomes of Canada's bold response and explore how this escalating tension could reshape the future of the auto world and global trade dynamics. Revved reality. U.S. automakers in the hot seat. The U.S. automotive industry is bracing for significant impacts as Canada considers retaliatory measures. In 2023, the U.S. exported $24 billion worth of automotive goods to Canada, highlighting the deep integration of the North American auto market. Canadian tariffs on U.S.-made vehicles and parts could have far-reaching consequences. Production costs are likely to rise, potentially leading to higher consumer prices and reduced demand for U.S. vehicles in Canada. The tightly integrated supply chain, where parts often cross borders multiple times during production, faces severe disruptions. This could result in delays, inefficiencies, and increased costs throughout the manufacturing process. Automakers might be forced to relocate facilities or seek alternative suppliers, incurring significant costs and operational challenges. States heavily reliant on automotive exports, like Michigan, which exported $23 billion in goods to Canada in 2023, could see major economic fallout. The automotive sector, a significant employer in many U.S. regions, risks layoffs and economic hardship in communities dependent on this trade. As tensions rise, U.S. automakers face tough decisions. They may need to reevaluate their supply chains, potentially shifting some production to Canada or other countries to mitigate tariff impacts. This could lead to job losses in the U.S. auto industry and related sectors. Political maneuvers. A calculated Canadian counter Canada's retaliatory measures carries strong political implications, demonstrating a strategic approach to trade disputes. Targeting industries in key U.S. states like Michigan aims to pressure policymakers by imposing tariffs on goods tied to manufacturing hubs. This strategy mirrors past trade disputes, such as Canada's 2018 tariffs on iconic American products like bourbon and motorcycles, which were aimed at politically sensitive sectors. Canada's actions could shift political dynamics in regions reliant on these industries, potentially influencing future U.S. trade policies. The domestic political climate in Canada adds complexity to the situation. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's recent resignation has created a leadership vacuum. Leadership candidates like Chrystia Freeland are pushing for firm stances on trade issues. Freeland's "tough on tariffs" platform reflects a broader national sentiment to counter perceived U.S. economic aggression. These political maneuvers underscore how trade policy intertwines with politics, showing that economic actions are often designed to achieve both political and strategic goals. The outcome of Canada's leadership transition could significantly influence the trajectory of this trade dispute. Agriculture in the crosshairs. The agricultural sector, a cornerstone of U.S. exports to Canada, is another area bracing for impact. In 2023, the U.S. sent significant amounts of corn, soybeans, and orange juice north of the border. Tariffs on these goods would shrink their competitiveness, potentially driving Canadian consumers to seek alternatives. For U.S. farmers, the consequences could be devastating. Lower demand in Canada might result in a domestic surplus, pushing prices down. Margins for farmers, already operating on thin profits, would shrink further. This could cascade into rural communities where agriculture is a lifeline, triggering unemployment and economic downturns. A prolonged trade dispute could erode relationships with Canadian buyers. Once lost, market share is hard to reclaim, and it might take years to rebuild the trust necessary to resume previous trade volumes. The agricultural sector's vulnerability in this trade dispute highlights the interconnectedness of North American economies and the potential for wide-ranging impacts beyond the automotive industry. Energy exports. Canada's strategic bargaining chip. Canada's energy exports, valued at $100 billion in 2023, represent a powerful leverage point in trade negotiations. The US heavily depends on Canadian oil, natural gas, and electricity, especially in northern states and refineries. While no official restrictions have been announced, the potential for limiting energy exports gives Canada significant negotiating power. Potential impacts of energy export restrictions include shortages in U.S. energy supplies, particularly during peak demand periods. Inflated energy prices for U.S. consumers and businesses. Strain on U.S. energy infrastructure not designed for sudden supply shifts. The U.S. refining industry, heavily reliant on Canadian crude, could face widespread ripple effects. Any disruption in this sector could have cascading impacts on U.S. energy security and economic stability. This potential disruption underscores the critical role of energy in the U.S.-Canada trade relationship. It gives Canada a powerful tool capable of reshaping economic dynamics between the two nations, potentially influencing negotiations far beyond the automotive sector. Critical minerals. Canada's game-changing leverage. Canada's rich reserves of critical minerals like nickel, cobalt, and lithium provide another significant point of leverage. These minerals are crucial for the booming electric vehicle, EV, and renewable energy sectors. The U.S. relies heavily on these minerals to power its EV ambitions and broader clean energy transition. Any Canadian restrictions on critical mineral exports could have far-reaching consequences. Disruptions in the automotive and tech industries, driving up production costs, slowed EV development and production in the U.S. Forced reliance on alternative, potentially more expensive sources. The geopolitical implications are significant. With China dominating the global market for many critical minerals, losing Canadian supply would force U.S. industries to seek costly alternatives or increase dependence on Chinese sources. Canada is exploring partnerships with the EU and South Korea for critical mineral trade, potentially bypassing the U.S. entirely. Such a shift would leave American automakers scrambling for raw materials, jeopardizing their global competitiveness in the rapidly growing EV market. If Canada wields its mineral reserves as leverage, it could reshape trade dynamics and intensify economic tensions between these long-standing allies. The outcome could significantly influence the future of the North American automotive industry and the global race for EV dominance. Testing the USMCA. Cracks in the framework. The United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, designed to stabilize North American trade, is facing a major test with this dispute. Canada's retaliatory tariffs could escalate into lengthy legal challenges under the agreement's arbitration mechanisms. This process could leave businesses in uncertainty for an extended period, affecting investment decisions and long-term planning. If Canada perceives the USMCA as ineffective in safeguarding its interests, it could erode trust in the agreement and prompt exploration of alternative trade alliances, such as with the EU or China. This potential shift would strain the USMCA's credibility as a stabilizing framework for North American trade relations. The long-term viability of the agreement could be at risk if it fails to resolve such high-stakes conflicts effectively. This could lead to significant economic and political consequences for all member nations, potentially reshaping the North American economic landscape. The outcome of this dispute could set important precedents for how trade disagreements are handled under the USMCA, influencing future trade relations and potentially leading to calls for revisions to the agreement. Global implications. A new trade paradigm. This US-Canada trade conflict has implications far beyond North America. Other nations facing US trade pressures are watching closely. If Canada's response proves effective, it could embolden countries to push back against US trade policies. Canada's appeal to the World Trade Organization, WTO, is particularly significant. A favorable ruling could strengthen Canada's position and potentially isolate the US diplomatically. This could encourage other nations to challenge US trade policies through legal channels, potentially weakening US influence in global trade negotiations. Beyond diplomacy, prolonged trade tensions would disrupt global supply chains. Industries from automotive manufacturing to electronics could face significant challenges. Nations adjusting to these shifts might form new alliances and trade routes, further complicating the global economic landscape. This could lead to a more fragmented global trade system, with regional blocs gaining importance over traditional global trade patterns. The dispute also highlights the growing importance of critical minerals and clean energy technologies in global trade. Countries rich in these resources may gain leverage in trade negotiations. New alliances could form around access to these crucial resources, potentially reshaping global economic and political relationships. Verdict: a trade standoff with high stakes. The escalating trade tensions between Canada and the US go far beyond economics. They highlight the fragility of long-standing alliances and the interconnectedness of today's global economy. From automakers to energy providers, the impacts will reverberate far and wide. Key questions remain. Can these two nations find common ground before the rift deepens further? Will this confrontation lead to more balanced trade policies, or will it spark a global shift in economic alliances? How will the outcome of this dispute influence the future of North American economic integration and global trade patterns? The resolution of this conflict could set important precedents for how trade disputes are handled in an increasingly complex and interconnected global economy. It may also influence the future of regional trade agreements and the balance of power in global trade negotiations. As we watch this high-stakes trade standoff unfold, it's clear that the implications extend far beyond the automotive industry. The outcome could reshape North American economic relations and potentially usher in a new era of global trade dynamics. What do you think? Will Canada's bold stance inspire a new wave of global trade realignments? Or is this just the beginning of a deeper economic conflict? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to Infinite Heights to stay updated on the latest developments in this high-stakes trade standoff. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.